Welcome to another DragonLance Saga review episode. It is Misham Reapember the 12th. My name is Adam, and today I'm going to give you my review of the Swordsheath Scroll by Dan Parkinson. I would like to take a moment and thank the Dale Saga members and invite you to become a member by visiting the link in the description below. You can even pick up DragonLance game materials using my affiliate links. Now, this is the 40th anniversary of DragonLance this entire year, and in November, I'm going to release the 40th anniversary celebration on dlsaga.com website, and that is a culmination of a bunch of different individuals contributing either video or audio or artwork that they've done or writings about Dragonlance or their personal experience or fan fiction or whatever. So if you haven't contributed yet, consider it. You can email me anything you want to info@dlsaga.com, and I will put it on the website. And November 1st, when it's all launched live, we can all enjoy and celebrate Dragonlance 40 years at the same time that Dragons of Autumn Twilight was released. It'll be a lot of fun. All right, so this is my perspective only. If you disagree with it, that's okay. Just throw up your comments in YouTube chat if you're joining live, and if you're not, put it in the comments below. In either case, we'll have some fun. The way these work is I'm going to give you my pre-written review. It's not very long because there's not a lot of, well, there's not a lot to this novel. I mean, it's just a story. So if you have any comments, that's what I'm going to sort of bounce off of at the end of my review. And that's kind of the way these go. So let's get into it, shall we? Chris, good to see you. All right, here we go. Part one of the novel dealt with catching the reader up with the passing of hundreds of years. So this is much later than the last novel, until the very beginnings of the war between Ergoth and Sylvanesti. Ergoth has raided the Nidar settlements outside of Thorbardin in Calthax and collected every living being as slaves for their mining operation. This was how they funded and equipped themselves for the war with the elves. The dwarves of Thorbardin didn't send anyone out to protect the Nidar because they were warring within. With no king, the only peace they found was temporary. The descendant of the king regent, Derkin Winterseed, left the mountain out of frustration and was quickly snatched up and enslaved by Ergoth. Derkin was taken to the Claneth mine and brutally whipped each time he tried to escape. The other dwarves could see that he was planning a new escape and recognized his heritage, so they planned to escape with him, even against his wishes. He was ultimately met by a Daewar named Callan Silvertoe, who had looked for him on behalf of an elf named Despaxus. Despaxus is the grandson of the elf Eloeth, who first met the Hylar Callan when the Hylar first came to Calthax. That was in the first novel. She's working with Kithcanon in opposing Ergoth and could use the dwarves as help. But with them warring in Thorbardin, they will need to unite under a king, and Derkin is the dwarf with the lineage to do just that. Despaxus, with Callan, break out Derkin and tell him why they did it and that he needs to raise an army. He decides to free the slaves miners, and they all work together to liberate one mine after another until they free Claneth as well. However, Lord Sakar Kane, the Ergothian emperor's cousin, is leading a brigade of human soldiers to Claneth mine for inspection, as it will be their primary supply route to reinforce the army. The mine's pit chief, Shalit Maline, is secretly hiding some of the ore mined to enrich himself and doesn't want Kane to know the slaves were revolting, but is ultimately killed by Derkin before Sakar arrives. The first part ends with a human Kobar named Tuft Broadleaf, who becomes a chieftain of his nomad tribe, reflecting on Derkin's accomplishments and how his people renamed him Derkin Hammerhand. The Ergothian Empire is currently in a war with both the Kobar and the elves. I'm interested in seeing what happens when the dwarves get their shit together in Thorbardin and join in the battle. I'm so pleased to be reading a novel about dwarves that not only highlights their decline, but also their superiority in building and general sense of honor with Derkin Hammerhand. I was so worried that this would be bad like the previous novel, but to my pleasure and surprise, 2/3 in, it's good. Derkin rounds up any of the Nidar scattered across Calthax and brings them into the Chosen One's fold. It's what his people call himself. He marches to Thorbardin to trade and treat with them. You can imagine the shock seeing an army of 9,000 marching toward the North Gate, but when they get close enough, they can tell that they are dwarves and are even more confused than anything. Derkin has given up his Winterseed name that everyone would know him by, so his identity is a secret for a while. They communicate with drums, telling Thorbardin that they would like to trade and that they want to address the Council of Thanes. When they get close to Thorbardin, Derkin dons his invisibility cloak and enters Thorbardin to see what state it is in, and they excel at it. Derkin meets with the council and, without work through trade, there's only infighting to keep the dwarves busy, and that's what they excel at. Derkin meets with the council and gives a wonderful speech about the decline of Thorbardin from its inception until now, and that they must reclaim Calthax from Ergoth. The Thanes ultimately vote to do nothing, and Derkin declares everything outside of Thorbardin his and his chosen ones. If Thorbardin wishes to trade with them, they will have to leave their halls. He trades furs and food for armor and equips his army, then leaves for Tharkan Pass. His army makes short work of the forces, in a small part because the elf Dispaxus asks the Kobar, Tuft Broadland, to harry the cavalry stationed there and run them in circles miles away for as long as possible, which they did, and it worked. When Derkin defeated the remaining forces, he built a massive wall to seal off Calthax and the returning forces. The commander arrived back and tried to get through the wall, but couldn't, so he returned to Clanoth to face the inevitable retribution of the Ergothian general Sacar Kane, a truly despicable man, as is all Ergoth portrayed. And as an aside, I would really like to read the Ergoth Trilogy now in order to see if they project themselves as being so evil as the other nations make them all seem to be. Lord Kane demanded that Commander Gart deliver an oath to Derkin Hammerhand. If the dwarves stay behind the wall, the humans will leave them be throughout the winter. Kane was instructed by the Emperor's emissary Dreas, who is actually the magical half of the Emperor Quavelin Soth V. He's returning to Daltagoth until spring. Then he will bring an army to destroy the elves and dwarves, as the Empire failed in defeating the Sylvanesti. Kane had no choice but to do as he was told, and stopped the mines and began his destruction of the dwarves behind their wall at Tharkan Pass. After the oath was delivered, Derkin sent his army south as the dwarves were not needed to protect the pass through the winter, and Derkin stayed with his guards until the snow covered the pass. That is when Kane struck. They used catapults to lob granite over the wall and crush the dwarves, actually striking Derkin and killing many of his men. He was saved by Helta, his future wife, and a runner who collected the army. They all returned and retook the pass. Derkin made 3 laws for his people and 1 for all others. If you strike a dwarf, they will retaliate immediately. They rode for Clanoth Mines in the night and decimated their entire force. It turned out that Kane was called to Daltagoth and was not there, but the rest of the army stayed. Derkin took oaths from all citizens that left and made them swear never to attack a dwarf, and then they were all let go. And he killed all of the soldiers. Then he razed the fortress to the ground, taking every stone to Tharkas Pass, and when they were done, crafted a monument with the 4th law for all to see before they would enter Calthax. Mess with the dwarves, and they're going to mess with you. In spring, Ergoth returned with their forces en masse. The dwarves knew that they couldn't survive, but they would not back down. They bled the Ergothian army, burying many in landslides that filled in the mines, but they took massive casualties of their own. They were met by the dwarven forces that aided Sylvanesti in their conflicts, and together they faced the Ergothian army until seeing their own deaths. Then the impossible happened. The elves joined in the fray, as did the human Kobar. United together, they defeated the Ergothian forces, making Dreas flee through magic. In the aftermath, the elves proposed using the stones to build a new city together with the dwarves, and the construction of Pax Tharkas was begun. The dwarves named Derkin Lawgiver and pressed him to be their king. He refused initially, but saw visions of his forebears and a possible united Calthax and Thorbardin. He would stay to complete the dwarven portion of Pax Tharkas, then return to Thorbardin and visit each clan's home to gain their loyalty. Then he stepped up as king regent, chief of chiefs, and the council amended the Covenant of the Forge so that there could, in fact, be a king. After the elves were completed with their portion of Pax Tharkas, Derkin and Kithcanon signed the Swordsheath Scroll, and Derkin and the kings that followed him ruled all of Calthax from Thorbardin, with each future king taking the throne name of Derkin out of respect for the dwarf who reunited their nation. There were a bunch of smaller plot threads that I won't address, but suffice it to say, this was a brilliant book and a wonderful way to close out the Dwarven Nations trilogy. If I could make a suggestion to future readers, you can skip Hammer and Axe altogether and read Book 1 and Book 3 only. You wouldn't lose anything, and it would save you some frustration. I truly love the trope of a king refusing his role until he realizes he is in need. A king that's willing to go to war with his allies and protect his people, even if it means putting himself in danger. I mean, I wish we had that type of leadership in our governments. I highly recommend this novel to any fan of Dragonlance and dwarves. All right, so, hey, Cithros, how you doing? This trilogy was a fun read. Yeah. I liked the first and the third one. The second one was rough for me to get through. This one was really great because, again, it went back to the essence of the first one, which was the Hylar, or the Kalnar. What do they call themselves? Kalnar, I think it was originally. So the Kalnar came over and united all the disparate dwarven clans. And that had to be done again by yet another Hylar. The Kalnar renamed themselves Hylar. And it's sort of a bit of a repeat of a story because, it's this sort of exile coming in to unite the kingdom, even though the kingdom was already together in Thorbardin. It's just they were all, sort of infighting and stuff. And it's funny to reference because this is sort of the fate of Thorbardin and dwarves in general. They will always war with each other, and they will always have some of their clans working against the greater majority, usually the Dergar. And in fact, in the War of the Lands, for example, they're working with Takesis. So for some reason, the dwarves can never get past their own grudges and their own self-sabotage and actually work together. And if they ever did, in fact, decide to work together and expand, they could probably take all of the other people just with themselves. Like all the elves and all the human nations. I mean, they could probably decimate them all, but they just can't agree long enough to do anything. And I do think it's also really interesting. Only the elves and dwarves are willing to sit tight in their own borders and kingdoms. Everyone else wants to expand out. And it doesn't matter what race you're talking about, whether it's goblins or ogres or humans especially, or minotaurs. Everyone else wants to expand their borders, but the dwarves and the elves, they're just like, no, this is my house. I'm cool. I'm all right here. You guys do whatever you want. We're going to stay under our mountains, and we're going to stay in our forests, and all you other crazy races do whatever the hell you're going to do. I think that's kind of funny. It's just a different way of, approaching existence. I mean, it's certainly one that I wish all of our nations would do, i.e. Russia and Israel, to just stay within the borders and not press outside of them. But what are you going to do? That's life. All right. I mean, with no questions or comments or anything, that's kind of it. Thank you, guys. This is going to do it for my review of the Swordsheath Scroll by Dan Parkinson. What do you think of Derkin, Winterseed, Hammerhand, and Lawgiver, since he has 3 last names? Why does it take the males in these stories so long to recognize the amazing women around them? And finally, have you ever read a story about Ergoth where they weren't all asses? Feel free to email me at dlsaga@dlsaga.com, or leave a comment below. I would like to take a moment and remind you to subscribe to this YouTube channel, ring the bell to get notified about upcoming videos, and click the like button. All this goes to help other Dragonlance fans learn about this channel and its content. This channel is all about celebrating the wonderful world of the Dragonlance Sagas. Thank you so much for joining the celebration. So until next time, for Dragonlance Saga, my name is Adam. Slanchavar.